The Wire is one of those TV shows which typically doesn't lend itself very well to single episode reviews, as it's a show where often details which may occur in one episode tend to not pay off up until several episodes or even seasons later, as the greater themes of the show only become clear once you have the entirety of the puzzle in front of you. However, if I were to have to introduce somebody to The Wire and could only show them one episode, it would 150% be Middle Ground. Now, I'm not saying in any way, shape or form that prior to this episode coming out, The Wire wasn't an already amazingly written show, because it was. However, at the time of this episode's release, we were only on to the show's third season, and therefore wasn't even close to completing the full puzzle, and truly understanding just how masterful this piece of art really was. And for me, this was the episode which really gave me that sort of an indicator as to just how much of a masterpiece this show was going to be. And it's also one of the only episodes where the majority of the show's setups were all paid off. Omar and Brother get their revenge on Stringer, McNulty and his team catch Stringer, Prop Joe's plan to cause discord in the Barksdale camp came to fruition, we got to see the benefit Bunny Colvin's Amsterdam has on the community, Stringer getting raid made by Clay Davis. And also, this episode was kind of the beginning to a new era in the show, one I like to call the Marlowe era, and in turn, the ending to the Barksdale era, which was beautifully brought to wraps with Stringer and Avon's final scene together on the rooftop, something I'll cover a little later on in this video. Now, this episode opens with one of my favourite scenes in the entire show, and one of the greatest cold opens to a television episode we might ever see, which is a western style standoff Omar has with Brother Mouzone, one in which the dialogue these two exchange is nothing short of perfection, consisting of callbacks to the two's prior showdown, where Omar caught Brother off guard in his motel room, and Brother now catching Omar off guard in an alleyway. And the fact that these two are some of the most intelligent and skilled characters on the show just makes their face-off all the more interesting, as they're constantly getting one over on each other with their unmatchable wits, at the time dragging me to the very edge of my seat, as I honestly had no idea as to who was going to come out on top in this exchange. However, Brother eventually reveals his true intentions, a setup we later get to see paid off in the very same episode. This is then followed by McNulty and his team tracking down Shamrock and Stringer via the phones that Lester sold to Bernard several episodes earlier. However, they soon find out that Stringer isn't actually on the same network as all of the other members of his crew, as he doesn't buy his phones from Bernard, setting up yet another problem for the detectives, and another payoff for the end of the episode. Now, if McNulty's hunt for Stringer was the A storyline of the episode, and Omar and Brothers' hunt for Stringer was the B storyline, then the downfall of Amsterdam would definitely be the C storyline, which is kicked off with Burrell and Rawls confused as to why they haven't yet been given the go-ahead to raid the free zones, and City Hall pleading with Mayor Royce to do so. However, Royce is in what is called a rock and a hard place, as he doesn't want to lose the support of the ministers and city council by keeping Amsterdam open, but also doesn't want his crime stats to rise by closing it, which he knows would severely affect his next run at becoming the mayor, seeing as though his whole campaign will be about the 14% decrease in crime, which, as we all know, is just another duking of the stats, a common theme heavily explored on this show. Anyway, Mayor Royce attempts to find a middle ground, in turn delaying any action being taken on Amsterdam, and ultimately damaging his next run at mayor, indicating to us as an audience that in the world of politics, and what we'll soon learn later on the game as a whole, there is no middle ground. And this is what Stringer Bell struggles to come to terms with when he's grilled by Levy regarding his business dealings with Clay Davis, as throughout the entirety of the show, one of Stringer's main goals is to run the drug trade like a normal legal business, which, as we all know, is just far from possible. And this scene really cements Avon's statement made a few episodes earlier when he describes Stringer as a man without a country, which is reinforced by the beautiful symbolism in the background, with the large white government building representing the legal world, and the dark sullen structure Stringer stands beneath representing the illegal world, which, unlike Stringer Bell, Levy is seamlessly able to cross between. And I love the way in which Levy just spoon feeds Stringer by effortlessly breaking down the entirety of Clay Davis's scam, which up until this point a few of us weren't even fully aware he was running, until every little piece of the puzzle is put together, and details which at the time we had no context to, are now perfectly explained by an actual businessman. Yet another example of this episode perfectly paying off major storylines which were set up much earlier.
Everything. The faucet, the goose.
Oh, goose.
The one that lays them golden eggs.
Told you about the faucet. Oh, it's the goose that laid the golden egg. You ever actually meet the man? Did you ever actually see any of your cash reach anyone in authority?
Yeah, I met the guy at the federal building. Yeah, I met him.
Yeah? What office?
Came down to the lobby.
Now back with the C storyline, Burrell has gone behind the mayor's back to inform Thomas Carcetti about Royce's decision to hold off on Amsterdam, all in the hopes that Carcetti will pass this information over to Tony Gray, who can use it against Royce in his run for mayor, explaining the pressure that Royce had put on Irv to bring the crime rate down, and then Irv on to Colvin, whose response was to set up Amsterdam. However, Carcetti decides to hold off on informing Tony Gray, wanting to hear Colvin's side of the story first, and this is done for two reasons. One is Tommy simply wanting to explore new solutions regarding Baltimore's drug and crime issues, and two is because if Colvin can give Carcetti some ammunition of his own, perhaps regarding Royce's push for duking the stats, then Tommy's going to be able to use this against Royce when he runs for mayor in the future, debunking the 14% decrease in crime citywide stat, another key detail to remember for the future. Now 15 minutes into the episode we're introduced to our final storyline, which is all about Cuddy and his worn down boxing gym in desperate need of new equipment. So Cuddy decides to turn to his old friend Avon in the hopes of getting some cash. However, because of how Cuddy left things with Avon, he decides to turn to Bodie, hoping that he could hook the two up with a meet, rather than simply just rocking up to Avon's compound unannounced. And whilst Bodie makes a phone call, our first major crossover between storylines takes place, as Lester and McNulty use a triggerfish device Jimmy picked up a few scenes earlier, to track down all of the outgoing calls from the nearest cell tower, which is actually a really smart way to show the audience how this new device works, without taking important time out of the story to explain it. Anyway, Cuddy approaches Avon trying to appeal to his better nature, by reminding him of his days as the Golden Gloves, a throwback to the poster Lester found in Season 1 to identify Avon. However, Avon refuses to have his name anywhere near Cuddy's gym for obvious reasons, and just as Cuddy thinks his old friend's going to say no, Avon and Slim remind Cuddy of the time he spent in jail to protect the Barksdale organisation, and give Cuddy $15,000.
Go get him 15,000 cash, man.
Yo.
Shit. Alright then, man. Hey, you take care of them little niggas, man.
Man, no doubt, bro.
Now a little comparison I want to make here between Cuddy and Stringer is that both of these characters had to go through a lot of bureaucratic red tape to get started on their business. However, unlike Stringer, Cuddy didn't use any bribes or underhand tactics to get the permits he needed, but simply met with the right officials, and in no time got those permits, proving that whilst politics isn't perfect, there are some things that can be done the official way. And this is also just another point which reinforces the idea behind Stringer being a man without a country, perfectly bringing us on to our next scene, which is Stringer Bell's attempt to put a hit out on Clay Davis. Now this scene opens with one of Slim's new soldiers not even recognising Stringer Bell, as he comes to meet with his lifelong partner, really emphasising just how much Stringer has attempted to distance himself from the criminal world. Anyway, Stringer orders Slim Charles to take out Clay Davis, which in his mind hopes to accomplish two things. One is revenge on Clay Davis, and two is the removal of Slim Charles from the Barksdale operation. See, because of Slim's unusually tall stature, Stringer knows that if he were to kill Clay Davis, it wouldn't be that hard for the feds to find and arrest him, and because of how close Slim has been getting with Avon, the feds arresting him would be just what Stringer needed. However, as Slim and Avon both point out, it also wouldn't be that hard for the feds to pin this crime on Stringer and Avon, seeing as though Stringer is constantly seen around both Slim and Clay, therefore the police putting two and two together wouldn't be that hard, really highlighting Stringer's woeful lack of self-awareness. And I love how Avon calls Stringer out on his hypocrisy once more as well, as Stringer's always claiming to be this businessman, yet when something in the legal world doesn't go his way, turns straight back to being a gangster, which is just the very definition of a man without a country, one who's maybe not hard enough for the gangster world, and also not smart enough for the legal world.
They saw your ghetto ass coming from miles away, nigga.
Now after this takes place, Stringer finds himself in a very similar situation to Mayor Royce, stuck between a rock and a hard place, as not only has he just been called out on his hypocrisy by his lifelong partner, but is also being forced by the co-op to end the war with Marlowe. So Stringer attempts to find a middle ground by snitching on Avon to Bunny Colvin, however only wants Avon to suffer the parole violation charges, in turn not souring their relationship too much, but also not being forced out of the co-op and Prop Joe's package. Now Stringer claims that the reason he's doing this is because it's good for business, however Colvin correctly asserts that Avon must have in some way done something bad to Stringer, as there's no way even somebody as money hungry as himself would sell out his lifelong friend for some extra cash, which is 100% the truth, as the majority of Stringer's decisions have all been influenced by very personal emotions, such as the torture of Brandon, murder of D'Angelo, hit on Clay Davis, the list goes on. Anyway, I love how Colvin also hints at the fact that he and Stringer have potentially known each other for quite some time, with the line, "Speak your mind, Russell," heavily implying that these two probably had a lot of run-ins back in the day. Perhaps they even went to school together like Omar and Bunk, or Prop Joe and Irvin Burrell. And there's also another little crossover between storylines, when Stringer says that Amsterdam was the reason he came to Colvin over anybody else, really validating Colvin's whole philosophy on policing, and that there is actually a merit to his cooperative methods, proving that even a guy like Stringer can eventually open up and try to help an honest policeman. And if the quote that's repeatedly uttered throughout the show is true, regarding the police only being as good as his informant, what does that say about Colvin's policing skills if he's got Stringer Bell as an informant? Man, just the introduction to this scene is perfection, with Avon just looking shook beyond belief, and then coming to the realisation that if Brother wanted him dead, he wouldn't have even seen it coming. Just another example of real meeting real, very similar to the introduction of the episode actually. Anyway, Brother confronts Avon regarding the hit put out on him by Stringer Bell a whole season earlier, explaining that Omar was the one who told him, to which Avon replies by asking Brother whether or not he actually believes Omar. And it's always really fascinated me how, despite the clear feud Avon and Omar have had going on for 3 entire seasons, Avon to some extent actually respects Omar as a player of the game, acknowledging the fact that he's actually an honourable person who wouldn't lie, unlike his partner Stringer Bell. We're then called back to another detail which was set up over a whole season ago, with Avon pondering over how Prop Joe's deal with Stringer, regarding Eastside offering Westside coke in turn for territory, could have potentially resulted in this. Yet another setup paid off. And Avon, similarly to Stringer Bell and Mayor Royce, also finds himself stuck between a rock and a hard place, attempting to find a middle ground, to which Brother perfectly explains that it's either give up Stringer, or lose your connection to New York. And like a true king of the game, Avon decides to do what's best for business, rather than his personal emotions. Thomas Carcetti finally gets a hold of Bunny Colvin, hoping to learn his side of the Amsterdam story. Bunny shows Carcetti the positives that drug legalisation have had on the West Side, showing him just how clean his once most drug rampant corners have become. He also takes Carcetti to a West Side community meeting, in which he gets to see the positive impact Amsterdam has had on the community as well as general policing, with police now having the time to really get to know the community on their footbeat. Colvin then references an old Malcolm X quote when describing a man he once knew by the name of Old Man Stryker, explaining to Carcetti that he'd have more respect for an evil man who let him know where he stood, rather than somebody to appear as an angel, yet be nothing but a devil, which is a perfect insight into the character Carcetti becomes once he's mayor, which is exactly that, a man who appeared to be Baltimore's saviour, yet through the corrupt political system, became just like all the rest. Bunny then takes Carcetti to see the negatives of drug legalisation, which is Amsterdam itself, and it's actually really tragic how you can tell at this stage in time Carcetti did really care about the drug epidemic. However, things like the school budget and politics ultimately forced him to ignore this, yet another setup into one of the Wire's more important themes: context. McNulty and his team finally get Stringer Bell's phone number, however need the affidavit McNulty's going to later on sign to be processed as soon as possible, seeing as though Stringer could toss his cell at any minute, so Lieutenant Daniels meets with Fitz hoping to get the affidavit process sped up, explaining to Fitz that he owes someone due to the FBI being responsible for the Greeks' escape in Season 2. So Fitz convinces the FBI that the team are onto a terrorist by the name of Ahmed, which gets them their affidavit processed immediately. And whilst Jimmy's signing it, Judge Phelan gives him some advice regarding letting a case go once it's finished, implying that Jimmy's life would be better off if he weren't so prudent to prove he's better than everybody else all the time, which is actually a very good symbolic analogy for policing, as if you're not on the street talking to people and being a part of the community, then as Colvin says, all you're doing is occupying territory. And in Season 4 Jimmy actually takes the judge's advice by becoming a patrol officer. Anyway, Stringer Bell gets a phone call from Shamrock regarding 2 hitters he's ordered for what I believe to be Clay Davis, which is seemingly just enough evidence for the unit to arrest Stringer, and is a supposed completion to a storyline which has been present since the very first episode of the show, the capture of Stringer Bell. However, as The Wire has constantly proven to us throughout its 3 seasons, storylines will never end the way you expect them to, which perfectly brings us on to arguably one of the greatest scenes in the entire show. Man, there is honestly nothing I can say here which is going to do this scene justice. I mean, this right here is the pinnacle of television writing. Like when you discuss the greatest scenes of all time, say for example Hank's death in Breaking Bad, Ned Stark's death in Game of Thrones, or Tony Soprano's dream sequence in the episode Mayhem, you put this scene right up there with it. I mean, it's perfect. The amount of layers here just blow my mind, with both characters knowing that this is going to be the last time they ever see each other, yet can't express any of their true emotions due to the violent culture and conventions of the game they've been brought up in. And Stringer's line about not having to dream anymore, just perfectly encapsulating the ambivalence these two feel towards each other, torn between respect and ambition, and the look on his face when Avon finally asks him where he's going to be tomorrow, like he knew something was off, and would never answer that question if asked by a normal person, however deep down trusted that Avon wasn't capable of betraying him, despite Stringer also betraying him at that very same moment. Oh, and the acting, man. Idris Elba and Woody Harris both just nailed every single line of this to perfection. I mean, the look on Avon's face when he says his final goodbyes to his brother just shows you that he's going to feel this loss forever. Truly a masterful scene, man. Yet another scene in this episode which is just masterful, with Omar and brother tracking down Stringer to one of his housing projects, and interrupting him right in the middle of his argument with Chunky Colts by blasting his security guard with a shotgun. Now Stringer makes a run for it, however finds out all the doors in the building are locked, which actually serves as a metaphor for how Stringer played himself into a corner with his scheming, constantly telling people to close and lock doors, only to find out that what's preventing his escape is all of those locked doors, really highlighting the fact that Stringer was truly his own worst enemy, and that nobody posed more of a threat to him than himself. And this has all been foreshadowed since the beginning of the show, so yet another example of a massive payoff taking place in this episode. Anyway, Omar and brother eventually corner Stringer, who pleads with them for his life, offering to give them the only thing he can: money. However, Omar perfectly explains that it isn't about money, but rather Stringer breaking the laws of the game when he tortured Brandon all those years ago, even rubbing in Stringer's face the fact that unlike Brandon, Omar and brother didn't even need to torture Avon to give up Stringer. And notice how Stringer's spirit isn't broken by the two notorious killers cornering him, but rather the news that his only friend in the world has betrayed him, before Omar and brother both unleash hellfire on Stringer, leaving his corpse in the episode with some beautiful visual symbolism in the background, with Stringer Bell's body being touched by the light representing the legal world, but also touched by the shadows representing the illegal world, and the final shot of the B&B Enterprises billboard representing the inescapable nature of the game, reinforcing the central idea of the series, which is the idea that the drug trade is a self-perpetuating system, with all those involved in it bound by its rules and consequences, no matter how hard they try to escape.
Oh, get on with it, motherfucker.
Now, if I were to truly sum up why this episode was so great, besides all of the perfectly written scenes, I'd have to put it down to the fact that, similar to say episodes like Breaking Bad's Ozymandias and Better Call Saul's Chicanery, it's the episode where the majority of the major storylines that have been set up throughout the course of the show are all rewardingly paid off in this one singular episode, acting as a sort of reward to those who've stuck through all of the so-called slow moments in the show. Anyway, I just want to thank you all so much for watching. Please make sure to like, subscribe and turn on post notifications, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.